If I was to teach managers one skill only, it would be step into conversations. I grew up through various organisations, started out in recruitment in a headhunting firm way back in the day. I'm super curious about what people do for a living, which kind of helps with the work. I'm really direct. I don't mince my words.
Lorna Bains is the Managing Director of Vilo Consulting and a former Chief People Officer at Disguise. She also serves as a trustee at Building Trust International. With extensive experience in HR and business transformation, she works with organizations and leaders to drive sustainable change and stronger performance.
There's not enough training on this, and people are put into this people management roles.
We spoke earlier about this new employment regulation coming in the UK. Do you think it'll shift the culture of organisations?
I think it will encourage better management behaviour because
Hi Lorna, welcome to The Power Between.
Good morning, Roddy. It's lovely to be here. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Excellent. Well, as we've just been mentioning, it's a bit of a dreich day. We're both Scots, we're both in Scotland, and dreich's a good Scots word to describe miserable weather. So let's see if we can add a bit of sunshine to the day here, even if it's not like that outside.
Excellent.
Well, now I'm really pleased to be in conversation with you too. You got a sort of full background of career history in a variety of different roles. You were at Disney and then at Disguise, which you perhaps can tell us a little bit about, and now you run your own consultancy, Vilo. So perhaps you should fill in the gaps rather than me sort of making them up as I go along.
Okay, cool. Shall I do a quick potted history?
Yeah, do that. That would be superb.
And I love the way you said a full career there. By that you mean you're old anyway.
That wasn't my intention, but
a delicate way of saying you're very
well.
long.
I was in conversation with someone yesterday, did one of these, and they were pointing out that the important thing to do is to understand how people receive the phrases you use rather than. And obviously, I'd failed to do that with that one. So
yeah, I know. I have reached the stage where people stand up for me on the bus, that kind of thing.
Well, you don't quite nice to make the most of these things when they come along.
I know. I don't quite know how to react to that because I feel like I am a feminist, but I am an older, tireder feminist, so I always take the seat.
I'd accept with alacrity. Right, yeah,
yes,
and grace.
Yes, I think about it and then I take it. Anyway, see, I told you we'd go off down rabbit holes. Potted history is what we're doing. So, I grew up through various organisations, started out in recruitment, in a headhunting firm way back in the day, actually in a job centre originally, which was a great place to learn, really, really great place to learn about people and work and jobs. And I think actually that's a theme through my whole career. I'm super curious about what people do for a living, which kind of helps with the work. So grew up through recruitment, various different organizations. I think HR people, the skills are transferable across sectors. As you mentioned, I spent a lot of time in the House of the Mouse and loved that. It was a fantastic experience and learned a lot about corporate organizations and really how to get things done in those kind of organizations. I have spent a lot of time in different kind of media organizations and tech organizations. And actually, so you mentioned I'm now consulting. I actually started consulting 15 years ago and set up Vilo. What we focus on is leadership, team development, and HR broadly. And just really with a goal of making the experience of work better. Making the experience of work, and I know we're going to come on and talk about this, more purpose-driven, more fulfilling. I've always done really more than one thing at a time because I like variety. So I've always had this consulting work going on. And for the past 15 years, I've also done various either shorter term or longer term gigs as a fractional, which if you're familiar with that term, Roddy, it's the new term for part-time. which many of us have been doing for years. Anyway, so consulting and at the same time doing fractional work, a number of different projects from Channel 4 to various telco type projects. And just over 7 years ago, I started working with Disguise. Again, it was a fractional project that was supposed to be 60 days, and I stayed there for 7 years and was CPO there until December, just gone. And
What is Disguise? What does it do?
so Disguise is I guess media is still in the media world and technology world. So it's kind of tying together those two themes, I guess, in my life. I was going to try and explain Disguise succinctly. When I started there were 40 people in the business, and 4 of them were women. By the time I left, we were in 19 different countries, multiplied several times, gone through a couple of private equity transactions. And, I'd well gone past my 60-day contract. So I'm still a huge fan. I'm still an ambassador. I'm still, I think it's an awesome business, and I'm really proud to have done the work there. And I love my consulting work, so I'm now, 100% doing that again.
Fantastic. I'd like to pick up a little bit on what you mentioned right at the beginning, the job center. I mean, I think that is a really interesting place to start, because you're seeing all sorts at that place, and in that situation. And someone, we were talking about this in another podcast recently, that if you're people facing, if you're at that level, you have a much more instant insight into how teams work and other people around you work, than if you're in an office role and just everyone's doing their stuff on their computer, basically. So I mean, the environment itself is really good for seeing how people interact and work together. And then obviously, it's very career and job focused. It says so in the name.
And it's hugely rewarding and hugely frustrating at the same time. But isn't that always the case? It's two things are true at the same time. I had different roles there, but one of them was attracting local employers around Fulham. So I used to march around the Fulham Road, persuading the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker to use the job centre for their hiring. So that was fascinating, just how all these different organisations work. But also, I think because I was quite young, and I don't know why, they gave me the list of people who were 4 years plus unemployed to support. And lots of them were, and I'm not stereotyping, but lots were ex-military or just ex-institutionalized one way or another. So that was awesome challenge. And actually to support even 1 out of 10 of those individuals back into work was just hugely rewarding. I've always loved that, just supporting, enabling people to do and be the best that they can be.
Did they by and large want to be supported, or is there a sort of friction there?
Actually, definitely. Maybe didn't quite know how, or didn't quite know how to get back into work at that point. Yeah, and some of it was quite tricky. Some of the conversations were like learning how to have difficult conversations at that very young age with an older man sitting in front of me. And, I remember one particular conversation, and I had to help this guy think about how he showed up, how he presented. I was 23 or something. Anyway, but but I think that is a theme as well, is around, and this speaks very much to your, that in-between group. How do you have those real conversations? And I'm not even going to call it a difficult conversation, because it's not necessarily difficult, but how do you step into conversations with kind of candor and you're honest and you're compassionate at the same time? I'm really passionate about that. I think that if I was to teach managers one skill and one skill only, it would be that. Step into conversations, because I've spent my whole career saying to people, yeah, but have you spoken to each other? Have you folks
Absolutely.
had
Yeah.
that conversation? And people are, human, they're decent human beings, and they don't want to say something that they perceive to be unkind, or they just don't know how to do it. I think when you know how to do it and you practice it and you do it all the time, and it's just a default for me, you think that's really easy. Why don't you just candid and kind? And it's really important to hold those two things true at the same time. It's really important to hold those two things in balance. And it's absolutely critical. And I think it was there, like age 23, sitting in the job centre in Fulham Road, that I started to realise that was actually a thing. And that's been a real
But
thing. And I'm
that's quite a
still talking to
baptism,
managers
though,
about
isn't
that.
it? It's
Yeah.
a baptism of into or a dive, dropped in at the deep end, really.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we all struggle with it, all the way through our careers about how to do it. You need to push yourself into those conversations, and if you don't find some sort of resistance about embracing a difficult conversation, then
Yeah.
then there's probably something wrong too. But
Yeah.
it's about this being intentional about it, seeing that the conversation needs to happen, and then
That's it.
enabling that conversation to happen. Can you give any advice or reflection around how one does that, particularly? And that's a really interesting situation that you described. Whereas you were young, relatively young, and female against someone who's considerably older and male. There are there are tensions in that.
Yeah. And I work with CEOs all the time. And so there is that, if you're talking about, I think you're talking about a power dynamic, and I'm no longer the youngest one in the room, but I used to always, so now I've got, the grey hairs, etc.
A full career. Yeah.
A full career, yes. Don't know whether to be offended by that or not. Look, for me, it's about doing your preparation. Like, really think about what is the message you're trying to land. And then the second thing is, it's not about me. It's not, it's my responsibility to share what I notice, what I see, and I'm doing it. My intent, that's the key thing really, is intention. My intention is positive. My intention is good. I wake up in the morning wanting to enable people to do better and to be better. So I think it's like, check your intention, do your prep, practice what you're going to say. And especially if you're not that comfortable doing these things, practice what you're going to say. Know what your opening line is and know what your closing line is. That's really important. And I guess that there's something about reflect on when you have those conversations with care, with kindness, and with honesty. It's never a bad result. It's never a bad result. It's never happened. And I've
that's
done this
interesting.
loads, so many times. It never backfires.
As long as there's the respect there, isn't it? There's going to be the respect
Yeah.
and the trust, which goes with the care and kindness, obviously.
Yeah,
But
exactly. And do your prep and think about it. Don't. Honestly, we all sometimes shoot from the hip, and I definitely sometimes shoot from the hip. But if it's a more kind of challenging conversation, then do your prep. Think about what's the message you're trying to land. Think about how without soft soaping, because I don't do that. I'm really direct. I'm real, like, I don't mince my words. Because I think people know when you're mincing that thing about I'm trying to find another expression than shit sandwich, but there you go, I just said it.
right, yes.
That's everyone knows what that is. Everyone knows when that's coming. Everyone knows when someone's going blah blah blah, you're great, you're amazing, and you're really rubbish at this, and you're amazing. It's like, it's just a waste of time. So don't do
Although
that.
it's probably still better than just telling them the bad news, isn't it? As step one, or do you think it's not?
Yeah, I tend to just go with bad news first, or bad news. See, I don't even see it as bad news, like the constructive bit, because I think if you know that's coming, and 9 times out of 10 you do, just get out there, because you're doing it in a constructive way, and you're doing it with good intention. And I sometimes say to people, I wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't care about you. If I stopped talking to you, if I stopped giving you feedback, then we're not in a good place. The fact that actually,
I'm doing
I'm
it,
trying to
taking
see
the
this
time.
with, I'm seeing it with care and good intention. I'm honestly, Roddy, I'm sitting here trying to think about when has that backfired on me, and it
And it-
hasn't,
It's not
and it
coming to
hasn't.
mind.
No,
No, I think. Well, I mean, I think people, appreciate.
yeah,
I mean, they may not like it, but they appreciate
exactly,
it.
exactly. I always say, it's feedback. You have to listen. You don't have to agree. You can do what you like with it.
Yeah, but
Actually, you can do what you like
it's
with
some
it.
data points that you
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
you can
yeah.
put in the hopper and decide with. Through those various different roles, are you seeing that people are given sufficient training around that, or is it something that we're just expected to see others doing, respond to, sort of get the hang of it ourselves?
There's not enough training on this, and people are, whether through promotion or getting a new job, put into this kind of people management roles. I see it all the time. I've been talking about this my whole career. If put in these roles, but not given sufficient training, toolkit, support, whatever, and then 6 months later, we say they're not a very good manager. And I was like, well, you didn't help them just
It's
because
like
they're
asking
good at,
someone to do the accounts, but not telling them how to do them. Yeah, very scary, isn't
yeah,
it? And it's a,
exactly.
it's a
Yeah.
skill.
Yeah, exactly. And just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you're going to be good at leading people. And 90% of the time, more than 90% is learnable. These things are all learnable. Some people, some in terms of kind of people leadership roles, some people are more tuned into that than others. Some people really, really don't want to do it, but they think they have to progress. And in some organizations, that's true. But it shouldn't be. One should be able to progress as an individual contributor. But anyway, back to do people get enough development on this stuff? No, they certainly don't. And whether it's kind of on the job or mentoring or, the kind of development programs or a leadership program or whatever it is, people do need help with that. And I think what's interesting as well, and I'm just curious in your view on this as well, is I think people quite often maybe think they're good at this stuff, or they just aren't aware. They just haven't had someone kind of help them see that actually that comment you made, the impact that you have as a people manager, the way you rolled your eyes when someone spoke, actually
Well,
they're going home.
the fact you rolled your eyes, which you may have been unaware of, which is
Exactly. And people don't do, there's not necessarily malicious. It's not malicious.
yeah.
But I think when you sometimes share with people, did you notice it? I saw you do that? Did you realize you did that? And they'll go, oh, no, I didn't. And also, do you realize the impact that has on, for example, more junior members in a team who might go home and really worry about that? And they might spend the evening worrying about that. And then I think about the sort of knock-on impact of that, and then they're lying awake at night and they're worrying about it and they're worrying when they come into work in the morning, right? How does that affect performance? So, go back to that. Ultimately, this is about enhancing an individual performance, a team performance, and an organization's performance. This isn't just
So
fluffy
in the middle of
stuff.
an I mean, I'm really interested in this, and I'm also interested because those two roles that or organizations you've described working with, Disney, massive international, multinational, and very well known for its training and its development internally. So it does lots on that. In fact, it does it for other companies as well, I think, doesn't it? And then Disguise, which you joined as a scale up, and it obviously grew really fast. And those are two hugely different environments to operate in. Tell me a little bit about what went on in managing this kind of skill capacity development in those.
Yeah, and a lot of the work we do now is in scaling tech enterprises, and we also work in large corporate telcos, charities, whatever, architecture or law or whatever. The challenge is the same. The challenge is always the same. And everyone always says, oh, we're different because we're architects or whatever. No offense to architects. The challenge is always the same. And organizations are some are better, some are worse. And it just depends on different times and who different leaders are. I was at the Disney organization for quite a long time, and there were periods where there was a lot of attention paid to that and periods where there was less attention paid. And in smaller organizations, I would say it's less common that there is this kind of development work going on initially. But then actually, I think a lot of these kind of scaling tech enterprises have come to appreciate, and in fact, they're very much at the leading edge on this, that this kind of core management level, we do a lot of work developing boards and leadership teams and all that jazz. Great. But actually, if you don't pay attention to that middle level, and if you don't, where there's difficult conversations or various other topics, you'll not perform as an organization, because the frustration will always bubble up. So yeah, there is a difference of approach in that, budgets are different. So it's where do you prioritize, in a smaller organization, in a scaling organization, for example, probably your budget's tighter, probably, and it definitely is. And you're thinking about, and time is really tight.
Yeah, well,
And you just don't have capacity to spend.
it is. It's the bandwidth as much as anything else, isn't it?
Yeah. And you don't have capacity to spend days and days learning, one. And two, I often have conversations with managers or leaders about the return on investment of spending time having these conversations, for example, spending time developing your teams, because in a scaling, really busy, environment, sometimes they might think it's quicker just to do, I might just do it myself. It's quicker. I don't have time to develop that person. And my view is you don't have time not to. And because actually, if you add up the hours, and we can break down your salary and look at how much it costs for you to go off and do that yourself, or how much it costs over a 3-month period for you to, that's a daft
But
example.
again,
But
you can crunch it a bit.
Yeah. And you can say, actually, invest the time in developing this individual, invest the time in having the conversation, invest the time in motivation, and and thinking about what people need and why people come to work. And it is different for different people. And you do need to tap into that. I think that's how you successfully lead a team. So yeah, I think the challenges are broadly similar. The context is different, but the challenges are similar. And the approaches are different, and it can be a lot less structured. But it can be, I know some smaller organizations that invest heavily in this stuff, and they're really smart. They're really on the leading edge of this stuff. And I know larger organizations that don't pay enough attention.
Well, less good.
Yeah, exactly. Who you would expect, and I'm not talking about Disney here, but some larger organizations you would expect. You think, oh, well, they must have this stuff nailed, but they don't really.
And they just don't. I mean, the scale-up one's really interesting because, there are significant challenges. If you're growing really fast and you're recruiting, you're bringing people on, and you're spending a lot of time, presumably, on interviewing them and getting the right person once they're in place, you're probably already recruiting the next person. And there's always going to be that sort of disconnect, lag. And it takes, one of the things that I suppose that have really come out through these conversations I've been having in the podcast is, it takes a particular type of person to be good at that mid-level leadership, to be interested enough in the other people to care, rather than interested enough in the work to complete the objective. And if you're in that scale up, you're probably on a spectrum. You're closer to doing the work, getting the objective, achieving the objective, and moving on to the next target. Particularly if you're PE driven, or private equity driven, than if you're in a larger organization which has a bit more space and time to look after the people and bring them on board. So it is challenging, but you say that you work lots in that environment. Is it about just really putting a mirror in front of people and saying, listen, if you don't do this, you're, the phrase I like to use is, it's silent sabotage of your organization, that you're setting yourself up to fail further down the line because you'll have a dysfunctional people.
It is holding the mirror up. Like ideally you want people to come to the realization themselves. That is very much, I'm much more of a facilitator, if you like, than a trainer, if it was two ends of a spectrum. Because people do know, you just have to help them figure that out. So ideally it comes to the surface that way. And as I say, so yes, it is helping people understand the impact that they're currently having. And then you've got to help people with the tools and the development, the confidence. So it's capability, it's confidence, and it's mindset. So you approach the mindset is really important. You approach this conversation not thinking, oh, this is going to be really difficult, I hate having these conversations. You approach the conversation with curiosity rather than with judgment, for example, to quote Ted Lasso. Anyway, I think someone else said it, but I prefer Ted Lasso. I think someone else said it.
All right.
Yeah, lessons in leadership. Watch Ted Lasso. Anyway, so mindset's really important. How you actually come into the conversation. Have you done enough training that you're confident that you're going to land this conversation well? That's really important. You need to come in with some kind of gravitas and not hesitating. And have you got the capability? So do you actually know how to open up this conversation? Have you done your prep? Do you know how to give feedback? Do you know how to hold silence and wait for a response? Like these are kind of, do you know how to listen? Do you know how to listen, bro? And that's a real challenge.
That is a real
Start me
challenge.
on that one. I could do a whole podcast about listening. I think it's a huge challenge. I think it's the reason the world is the way it is, and a lot of geopolitical problems that we have are because people are not listening to each other, like fully listening without judgment, without needing to respond or defend or just
listening to hear
listen.
rather than listening to respond.
Correct. That's it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not easy to learn, or at least to acquire. I mean, you can probably understand the concept, the theory of it, but the practice is a lot more difficult, as I know, having been through some of those sort of workshops on it.
Yeah. But practice is the thing. That's the word, Roddy, because you have to go practice. And you will get it wrong, and that's okay. And I encourage people to tell your team you're practicing. That's fine. Tell your team, I've just been on this workshop about feedback, so I'm practicing here.
I'm practicing.
Tell me how I'm doing. Tell me how this lands with you. Right? That's totally disarming. It sets the conversation, again, that's mindset and intention, right? It sets the conversation up in a completely different way. And that's fine, because you've got to practice. There's very few people who are just intuitively, naturally, instinctively good. There are some, but most people have to learn it, and then they practice and they get feedback, and then they practice again, and that's it. That's the work. That is the work.
I think that's right, isn't it? I mean, and that it transforms the relationship between manager and report, or whatever we call the person. But the problem is, it doesn't have a sort of an output that you can that's tangible. It's the fact you're doing it is important, is received as such, but you won't instantly see a sort of, it's not as if a widget is created at the end of it, so you can tell. And so perhaps it feels a little bit sort of nebulous or fuzzy, or that you don't quite know whether you've done it right or not. You can't see what the output looks like, and I think that makes it challenging.
Yeah. Although I would say that you can and should see a result in that it should open up a conversation in a different way. Yep. So it depends how you classify results, really. It should open up a better dialogue, which should enable more feedback, which will enable better performance. And that can happen fairly quickly. If you've given someone feedback and it doesn't change the performance for 6 months, you've not done it right. So try again, and that's okay. We all get it wrong. And look, I'm coming off like I get this right all the time. I don't. I don't. And we all learn from those conversations. But I think just being open to, feedback on your feedback is
Feedback
really,
loop. Yep.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, so what do you see as really good ways of building up this kind of behavior capacity? Because it's not something that you're going to go to a 1 or 2 day workshop and get, and then
Yeah.
lo and behold, you're away. So, but that's probably part of it, I suspect, is it? And then there's role modeling, presumably too, seeing how it works with others. But
So I think there is a capability thing. There's a bit to learn. And part of that has got to be feedback as well. So, I would always just, if you've got a conversation coming up, bring it along and we'll practice it. So it's always about practice, which then starts to build confidence. And then part of the capability piece is also to just get people to think about how they're approaching. And that's the kind of inner work, think about what's going on in your head when you approach that conversation. Are you thinking this is going to be really difficult? It's going to be horrible. Or are you thinking about the row that you had with your teenager at breakfast? And again, all normal human behavior, but just be aware of that, because you're not, maybe you just need to pause and reset and then go back into the conversation. So there is a capability piece for sure. And then the practice piece, and be open about practicing and get feedback. And I think a key thing is then someone to keep holding the mirror up to you. So it might be a buddy in the organization, or you might have that relationship with your manager, but a buddy or a mentor who you can keep saying, how am I doing? What did you see? In that team meeting, what did you think about how I was responding to that, or that sales call? How did I do? Keep asking for feedback, I guess is the thing. But create those allies, I think, is important. Sorry, just to create those
I think
allies.
that's really, really powerful advice. Exactly. But I mean, you mentioned coaching and mentoring, and this is a sort of informal form of that.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily require any, formal skills. You don't need to have trained as a coach to do it, but it relies on that trust and respect that people may have between colleagues. And do you see that happening in many organizations?
Yeah,
Is it
I
underused?
do. No, I do. And because again, I go back to that. I think human beings wake up in the morning wanting to do good work and support each other. And of course, there are always toxic environments, but in general, so we start from that place. And I see it all the time, when we do this work around real conversations, let's say, or how to motivate my team, or how to set up my team, whatever it is. And we quite often encourage this kind of buddying idea, would you all work in the room of talk to different people? So it's facilitation rather than training. But also afterwards, when are you going to, before you leave the room, let's commit. When are you going to meet up with your buddy? When are you going to share and talk about? So it's more sustainable. I've worked in HR and learning, either in-house or in consultancy, for a long time. And for me, what's really important is stickiness, and how is it actually going to, because like you said, we can all go on a workshop for a day, chuck the stuff in a drawer, forget about it. And that's a waste of everyone's time. I always say in a room, there's a certain amount of change will happen in this room, but really the bulk of the work, the bulk of the change will happen afterwards when you're back at work. So yeah, I do so because I told her this, and I really encourage people to find a buddy, find an ally at work, or we set it up at a workshop, and check in with that person. And that becomes a really strong relationship. It works really, really well. And yeah, obviously I think formal coaching from a certified experienced coach is really important as well. Not everyone's got the time and budget to do that.
No.
Or it's appropriate for different things. It's just, different things at different times.
But I mean, the ally pairing ship, whatever we call it. You can never really grow out of that, can you? I mean, that's you should always be on the learning curve and
100%.
requiring that kind of honest feedback from someone.
Yeah.
And obviously,
what's your development need? Like always be, and I ask people this question all the time and it catches them off guard. And I'm not, it's just like what you're working on, because you should know what you're working on. You should be aware of what you're working on and have some kind of a personal development plan. And that might be, back of an envelope. I'm not saying you have to write War and Peace, but you have to have some kind of a development plan, because we all do. We all need to be working on something.
You need to know what direction you're heading in, really. Otherwise, you're probably heading in no particular direction at all. I mean, we also touched when we spoke earlier about this new employment regulations coming in the UK, and that's obviously UK specific, but it's quite significant, and a lot of it is sort of, I mean, it touches on parental leave and it touches on all sorts of working rights and stuff. But do you think it'll shift the culture of organizations?
Yeah, I think, look, we've had big employment law changes before, and this is another one. I think it will encourage better management behavior and practice where that doesn't exist. I think, it's kind of like the carrot and the stick of management development. And this is a bit of a stick, but it's good management practice anyway. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried for organizations about it, because I think this is just good management stuff, right? You should be spending time and energy making sure you're hiring the right people. You should spend time and energy setting up your probation period properly and making sure that people are getting feedback and they know how they're doing and all that kind of stuff. And performance management, absolutely critical. Again, you don't need War and Peace. You don't need, if you haven't got a big fancy system, it doesn't matter. It's about the conversation. Are we having a conversation? Are we, making a few notes about the conversation? Now that for me is all just good management practice. And that's kind of what you should be doing anyway. This is shining a spotlight on that. That's the way I think about it. And yeah, and yes, you need to make sure your policies are all up to date, etc. So there is, for HR departments, there is a lot of work to do. And for organizations that don't have an HR department, they need some help. That's fine. There is stuff. And I think it's more challenging for those smaller organizations that don't have that in-house expertise. So there's stuff, but from a leader's point of view, this is good. This is what you should be doing. This is great management.
And if you're captaining a happy ship, in any case, that's sort of that's well run in these ways, then there's relatively little that needs to be changed. I mean, the fear is, I suppose, and this came up, the conversation I had with David Little a few weeks back, is that who was getting exercised about grievance procedures and saying that with the advent of AI, HR departments are getting sort of 15-page, beautifully structured grievance procedure, grievances that they now have that can be generated at the touch of a button. And I just slightly wonder whether legislating more around this just opens up the door to that. But
yeah, and I think, look, it is a challenge, because it's your responsibility as an HR person you have to respond to every point on those 15 pages. And, that's not my favorite part of the job, and it's the kind of unseen part of the job.
Maybe you can chuck it into AI and get the response out that way too.
Well, you could, but I think actually, being responsible about it, like, you've got to respond to that. And yeah, and I think that will get worse. And I think it is a bit frustrating. It is frustrating. I've seen a 16-page one. I've seen a 24-page one, and it never used to be like that. It used to be like a couple of paragraphs. And that is a bit frustrating. And I'll go back to, if you're doing stuff right in the first place, if you've got good management practice and a good culture, we haven't talked about culture, but that's a whole thing as well. And people know what they're doing and why they're doing it, with clarity, purpose alignment, all of those good things. Don't get it's not going to be a problem.
I think that's absolutely right. That if you set the foundations properly and do the basics, and these are essentially basics, even if they're often difficult to acquire and overlooked by people. but
Yeah.
they are the fundamentals of leading
Absolutely.
people effectively, then you shouldn't be pushing people to the point where they want to put in a 16-page grievance.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that, whenever that happens, I'm not saying it's the manager's fault. And sometimes like there's lots of reasons why these situations arise. There's a big shift in grievances and and the complaints that are getting to ETs. There's a big shift in the nature of those and the demographic shift, and like there's a lot of reasons behind it. But I guess it's about what can you influence as a leader of a team. You can only do the best that you can do in terms of setting up the culture, setting up the right relationships with people, and building trust, and letting people have a bad day when they have a bad day, and really celebrating great performance when you see it. And that's sort of the bit, that's what you can influence. You can't influence what's going on outside, and there are terrible things going on in the world. And, and people come into work with the weight of that as well. You can't change what's happening in the world. You can only influence this world here. And if you do that in a really positive and constructive way, where people feel like, I belong here, I'm doing my best work, and I'm being recognized for my best work, and I'm able to do my best work every day. That's all you can do. And that's a lot. And that's, and that's probably enough.
And that's a lot, and I think that's the really important point. And that perfect place to finish, because it's the definition that we use for leadership here at Ideas for Leaders, is people who create the conditions for others to do their best work. So
there you go. It was almost like you teed me up for that, but you didn't. Listeners,
this conversation was going to go on until you said that, and you got there. So
well done me.
Lorna, it's been superb. I've really enjoyed that. Really interesting. And as you said, there's lots more. There's all the bit about culture too, but maybe for another time. But
I'd love that.
Thank you very much indeed.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.